Chapter 8, Section 7 is on powers and roots of negative numbers. So today should be kind of review again like Section 4, but this time we're just going to take some time to talk about negatives. So just to review some of the properties, negative 2 to the third means negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, which would give you a negative 8. Negative 2 to the negative third, on the other hand, would mean 1 over negative 2 to the third. So remember that the negative exponent flips it, so that would make that a negative 1/8. Okay, so remember that. And then 2, the square root of negative 36. Well, in order to square root a negative, you need to have imaginary numbers. So that's where we would just plug in an I there. So take the square root of positive 36, 6, add an I, and then anytime you square root something, you always have your plus or minus. Okay. Part 3, if x and y are not negative, I'm sorry, if they are negative, then you cannot use the rule where you can multiply them together. So that is not true if one of those is negative. Okay, same thing like in number 4, x to the third is not equal to the square root of x to the 6th if one of those are negative. Okay. Odd powers, if you remember this from last semester, only have one root. Okay, I remembered it because odd and 1 start with the same letter, O. Okay, and what's different is we use the imaginary number for the square root only. So you may think that it's with all even exponents, but that is not true. It's only for the square root. So let's try a few of these. Square root of negative 144 should be plus or minus 12i. Okay, so take the square root of a negative. Remember, that's just like an imaginary 2 right there. Okay, add an I because of the negative, plus or minus for the square root. Okay, part B, the third root of negative 125 means what to the third power is negative 125? That would be a negative 5. Okay, so difference between even, okay, and odd powers. Odd always has one answer, even gets your plus or minus. Okay, part C says the fourth root of negative 256. Okay, because this is a fourth and a negative, okay, that's going to be a no solution. We only use the i's here for the square. Okay, so any other even and a negative is a no solution. Okay, part D, the fifth root of negative 243. Okay, what to the fifth is negative 243, and that's 3. Again, that was an odd, so you have one answer. Okay, now if we take a look at, some of our more clearer examples. So we've got the third root of negative 27. Again, that's odd, so we'll have one answer. So that'll give me negative 3. Okay, part B, the sixth root, so even, okay, and negative is no solution because there's nothing that I can raise to the sixth power to get a negative 64. Okay, square root, okay, that's a 2 out there, of negative 81 will be plus or minus 9i. Okay, so there's a big difference between B and C. B is even, but C is a special case because it's a 2. Okay, 2 is the only case where you get your I, so be careful there. Okay, part D, fifth root of negative 243 plus fifth root of 32. So fifth root of negative 243, what to the fifth is negative 243. Okay, that'd be a negative 3. Plus the fifth root of 32, positive, would be a 2. So negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. Okay, so take your roots before you add. Same idea as power before add. Okay, letter E, third root of negative 8. So what's the third is negative 8? That's a negative 2 times the third root of negative 125. So that give me a negative 5. Negative 2 times negative 5 is a positive 10. Oopsies, positive 10. Okay, so again, just take your powers before you multiply. Letter F is looking a little different. Okay, so what I would do in F is I would rewrite this. So I would rewrite this as negative 64 to the 7th. And then remember that the 21st root is really to the 1 over 21 power. Okay, and then I would combine my powers. And remember that you always multiply to do this. So that's going to give me negative 64. 7 times 21 over 21 is 3. So my real answer here is, is 1/3. So what to the third is negative 64, and that give me a negative 4. Okay, so that might be a little easier for you to do it piece by piece, especially if I said no calculator. Okay, so put your powers together first, and then go ahead and evaluate it. Okay, letter G says negative, or the opposite of the fourth root of 10,000. Well, the fourth root of 10,000 is 10. Okay, and then because the negative is at the end, put a negative, and that makes that a negative 10. Okay, so pretty much just straightforward again. H says what values of n is the expression defined. Okay, so when do you get an answer? So I can get an answer if there's a negative in there if n is odd. Okay, because if that was even, I would have a no solution. Okay, now number 2, then this is even here, which means to have an answer of n would have to be positive. So I'd say n is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so these are a lot of the rules that you've already looked at, but just kind of in different notation. So hopefully things are okay. If not, write down some questions and then bring those to class tomorrow.